Tyler found himself on his hands and knees, looking at a patch of red grass, flecked with touches of green. It felt slimy beneath his hands and carried the scent of rusted iron. Lifting his left hand, he stared at the thick cherry liquid that coated his palm and dripped between his fingers. Before he could process what it might be, something hit the grass ahead with a wet thud and rolled towards him, leaving a glistening trail in its wake. The ball gently bumped his right arm and came to a rest, except it wasn't a ball at all. It was someone's head, without the body. The face was frozen in terror, teeth smashed in its open mouth, eyes bulging as if to escape their sockets. Tyler let out a scream, guttural and harsh from the very depths of his throat as he scrambled backwards. He looked up, searching for the body that was missing its head. He found it several feet ahead of him, slumped against a tree with blood spurting from the shredded remnant of its neck as it slowly slid down to take its final rest. Standing over, the corpse was a tall figure, too tall for a man. Skin that looked like the charred remains of a tree was stretched so thin across its body that it seemed impossible it hadn't torn. Gnarled ridges and rough edges covered every inch of the thing. It turned its head in his direction, but where eyes and ears should have been, there was only grooved skin. The thing had massive nostrils, though, 3 of them stretching across, the center of its face flaring as it sniffed its surroundings. Its mouth was open, revealing sharp teeth like black stalactites hanging inside a cavern. Tyler's heart beat against his ribcage, wanting to escape whether Tyler followed or not. His breaths were shallow, swift, like his beating heart. Every instinct, every fiber of his being was telling him to run, but he forced himself to stay calm. Forced himself to stay still. The thing continued sniffing, twisting its head this way and that, eventually settling in his vague direction. Given the lack of eyes and ears, Tyler reckoned it was dependent on smell, like a cat or dog. And if that was the case, it would likely be able to discern his scent. At least it would know there was something here that was not like the other smells. As if to prove Tyler right, the thing began moving in his direction. If his heart had been beating fast before, now it was trying to set a world record for beats per minute. His breaths were struggling to keep up, his lungs failing to draw air. Fast enough. He glanced frantically around him, searching for a place to hide, a place to flee to, but the forest offered little cover, like it had not to the headless corpse before him. The headless corpse? The headless corpse. He looked to where the head had fallen, the red grass, the glistening trail of blood it had left behind. He leapt forward and grabbed the head, holding it above himself so what blood remained would fall from its severed neck and drain over him. Then he put the head back, rolled in the puddle of blood that soaked the grass, and stood as the thing was almost upon him. Cautiously, carefully, he crept past the advancing creature. The thing turned towards him as he passed, but Tyler ran as quickly as he dared and positioned himself against the headless corpse that lay against the tree. He hoped it would work, that the creature would think he was the corpse and leave him alone. The thing looked in his direction, sniffed the air several times, but then stilled. It turned back to the head, walked over to it, and crouched down, where it opened its mouth impossibly wide and consumed the head whole. Tyler silently gasped. He had thought, or rather, he had hoped the corpse was nothing more than a hunter's kill. He watched from the corner of his eye as the thing returned, its massive nostrils flaring again as it sniffed around Tyler. It leaned in closer, its head hovering above Tyler's right shoulder, then against his face, then to his left. It sniffed across his torso and stopped over his heart. Did it know? Could it sense him some other way? Tyler thought back to his words to the old man and grimly smiled. He better not die. He hadn't even lasted 5 minutes. The thing began to open its mouth, but then stopped. It turned its head, looked into the distance, and stood abruptly. Tyler carefully shifted out of the way and lay a few inches from the headless corpse. The creature began to walk in the direction it was looking, but as it did so, one of the gnarled ridges on its bark-like skin detached with ferocious speed, shooting into the corpse where Tyler had been. His heart still pounding, Tyler watched as the creature walked away before letting out the breath that he had been holding. Above him, the black leaves of the forest trees shuffled, as if they too were glad to see the creature leave. Slivers of sunlight danced through gaps in the canopy. He looked down at the drying blood on his body, its stench thick in his nostrils. Only then did he realize he was naked. But he didn't care. The most beautiful girl in the world could walk upon him in this moment, and he wouldn't care. He was alive. Suddenly, white text floated into his vision. Quest complete. Survive an encounter with a demon tree sprite. 76,000 XP. He sprang upright, legs still resting on the forest floor, but the text followed him, fading out when it reached the top of his sight, before more text faded in at the bottom. Level gained. Level 25 R, level 39. For the briefest of seconds, a brilliant burst of golden light enveloped him like a miniature supernova, before dissipating in a flare of flickering sparks. And it's why, Reese Stockham with Quercian V. That is right. What had the old man said? Cytheria was a game world. He tried to think back to the last time he'd played a game, but nothing came to him. The memories of his old life remained missing. Perhaps he should have chosen the simple tutorial. He'd thought an advanced tutorial would take him through every aspect of the game, be more comprehensive than the simple one. He hadn't considered that it would force him to learn or die, though now that he thought about it, it couldn't really get more advanced than that. What better way to learn than by doing? And what better motivation than having his life on the line? And he had to admit, it had been effective. He looked at the headless corpse to his right. Perhaps not effective for everyone. He wondered briefly who the person had been, what dreams they might have had. Whoever the person was, it was over for them. There would be no going back to make a better choice. There would be no living a new life. Tyler burned the image of the headless corpse into his memory. It would be his first memory, a reminder of what could happen if he wasn't careful, a reminder that dead men have no purpose. Speaking of purpose, he'd been here too long. He needed to move. That creature, the tree sprite, he guessed, could come back at any moment. He looked beyond the headless corpse and his heart almost stopped. The tree sprite hadn't moved very far at all, no farther than 10 meters from where Tyler lay. It was hard to see, its bark-like skin camouflaged amongst the blackened trees that surrounded them. The beast had lifted its head, nostrils flaring, sniffing the air around it. Tyler ducked below the headless corpse for what little cover it could offer and watched carefully. Then he noticed them, standing a few meters beyond the tree sprite. Two women, one with silver hair and the other with a shaved head. The creature didn't hesitate. Projectiles flew from its body with incredible speed, aimed at the women, but they never reached their target. Tyler's eyes widened as the sharp pieces of bark bounced off an invisible barrier and fell to the ground. Almost in the same instant, flames erupted from the tree sprite's body, engulfing it from head to toe. Reflections danced across the clearing as the tree sprite writhed, in agony, yet it didn't move. Just as there was an invisible barrier protecting the women, there was something trapping the creature in place. In mere seconds, the tree sprite crumbled to the ground in ashes, its screams unheard, like the headless corpse that Tyler hid behind. Ashes settled on the grass as Tyler turned his attention back to the women. The power they had displayed was both terrifying and stunning. He needed to speak to them. If they were on the tutorial, they were clearly ahead of the curve. He just hoped they'd be willing to help him. As he made to leave his makeshift hiding place, he felt something sharp press against the nape of his neck. A female voice whispered into his ear, "Move and you die. Osteries." "Get up slowly and walk towards them," the woman behind him said, her voice deep and slightly hoarse. He did as he was told, walking over the headless corpse, and marched towards the two women. Once in front of them, he was forced to kneel down in front of the silver-haired woman. He was careful to place his hands over his naked parts. A moment ago, he might have been ecstatic at being alive, but now that he was faced with three women, he was very aware of just how bare his body was, bar streaks of drying crimson blood. The silver-haired woman looked to be in her mid-20s and was shorter than she had looked from afar. An inch or so shorter than himself, yet tall for a woman and imposing nonetheless. She had captivating light green pupils within impossibly large, rounded eyes and a delicate upturned nose that complemented her high cheekbones. Berry-colored lips stood out against her flawless bronze skin, and long silver hair flowed past her shoulders down to her waist. The other girl looked to be a little younger, dressed in a blue silk gown that hugged her figure from neck to waist and flared out towards her ankles. The gown was adorned with gems of a variety of colors. She had a round face beneath the shaved head and brown eyes that seemed lost in distant thought. He knew nothing of armor, wasn't even sure he'd seen any before, but what the silver-haired woman wore looked expensive. Violet plates caught the light that filtered through the canopy like the gleaming petals of an exotic metal flower. Her shoulders flared like the wings of a mythical beast. The ornate scabbard at her waist hinted at the beautiful weapon hidden inside, with its foot-long grip and a blade 3 times as long. Gold inscription was carved along the length of the sheath that was twice as wide at the hilt than at its point. The golden hilt was curved at its ends and inscribed with silver cursive lettering. Just as beautiful were the gems, in yellow, red, or blue, each marked with a silver line or cross that were set into her violet armor. He glanced at the gems on the young girl's simple dress and noticed they too had markings. Every piece of the silver-haired woman's armor seemed to be adorned with at least 1 gem, and some pieces had more, like her gloves and belt. Only her chest piece didn't seem to contain any. She looked into the air above his head and nodded, and he felt the pressure released on his neck. He wanted to turn his head but dared not. The young girl at her side stood still, eyes on him, a green pendant he hadn't noticed earlier around her neck. "What's your name?" the silver-haired woman asked, her soft voice at odds with the crushing pressure he felt. "Tyler." "Where have you come from?" "You mean like what planet?" "I mean, where in the kingdom are you from?" "Kingdom?" "Yes, kingdom." He tried to think back to what he was told of this place. The old man had said he would be in the kingdom of Illyria, but he had no clue where. He could tell from the woman's eyes that she was waiting for him to give her the wrong answer. "Honestly," he said after a moment of silence, "I don't know." "You don't know?" she said, leaning forward, looking at him as if she could see the answer in the very depths of his being. He shook his head. "I don't. I'm from a planet called Earth." She glanced to the leaves above their heads, and he tilted his head to look up too before turning his eyes back to her. She gestured to the darkening sky with her finger. "You're from another world?" At first, it concerned him that she didn't know that, but then he realized that he was assuming everyone on this planet was like him, given a choice to come here, or go back to an undesirable existence. He had no evidence to say that was the case, and from the way she was talking, it was evident it wasn't. Nevertheless, he had a feeling that his survival counted on convincing her that he was telling the truth. It would be an irony to avoid being killed by a monster, only to be killed by a human instead. "Yes, I'm from another world." "How many is that now?" he heard the woman behind him say. "3?" The silver-haired woman ahead of him looked to the woman he couldn't see and affirmed what was said with a brief tilt of her head. He assumed that meant there were at least 2 others like himself, but he found it hard to read the silver-haired woman's expression. He continued, "On. When I got here, I found myself in the forest on my hands and knees, looking at that creature you killed, and it had just decapitated someone. Do you know what that looks like? A body without its head?" She nodded. "Right. Of course you do. How did you survive?" "I covered myself in the blood of the decapitated person. It was enough to hide, and then you saved me. The demon walked this way before it noticed me." "Tell me how you got here and make sure you tell the truth." The silver-haired woman looked to the young lady to her left. "Mira here will know if you're lying." He flashed his eyes at the young girl and noticed the pendant had a soft glow. How had he gotten here? The memory was vague, floating at the edge of his consciousness. He closed his eyes, thought back, remembered, and slowly, the darkness behind. His eyelids gave way to the darkness where this had all begun. Enjoy next story. Was he dead? The thought bounced off the edges of the nothingness that lay ahead of him, rippling through the dark abyss, like a stone skimming across black water. Under the light of a new moon, darkness pressed against him, thick and heavy. He tried to look around. He could feel his eyes moving, his head turning, but it was like he was underwater, in the depths of the oceans where light feared to tread. Where was he? He wondered to the void, and his thoughts echoed back to him. Then another thought appeared, more concerning than the first. Who was he? More thoughts appeared in the endless vacuum ahead. Images, memories, flashes of vivid color against the black, like fireworks in a midnight sky. Visions flit past his eyes faster than he could decipher them. "Mr. Smith," a voice called out, a feminine melodic voice. His heart leapt at the sound, eyes frantically searching for the source of that beacon in the darkness. "Mr. Smith," she called again. Suddenly he felt pain, red-hot pain, spreading across his face like lightning branching through storm clouds. His eyes fluttered open. A young woman, tall and slender, leant over in front of him. Blonde hair spilled past her shoulders like golden rivers settling into the valley between the twin mountains, straining against her tight blouse. It was like an invitation to a climbing expedition. Had he been asleep? He couldn't recall. His mind was a foggy haze of emptiness that he couldn't shake away. He put a hand to his cheek, his flesh, raw and hot like his face had been pressed to a burning stove. "Did you—" He rubbed the side of his cheek, felt the heat under his palm. "Slap me?" "Come now," she purred. "You should be so lucky." He looked at her, the cleavage, the blonde hair, the piercing blue eyes, and he had to admit to himself, he should be so lucky. He peeled his eyes away and looked around the room. It was some sort of waiting area, the stench of cigarettes and cheap coffee masked unsuccessfully by the perfume that clung to the girl. He was sprawled across a sofa of purple velvet fabric that hugged the wall next to a massive wooden reception desk that he supposed served as the office for the young lady, hovering in front of him. Around him, the walls were plastered in endless patterns of figure eights and oranges and reds that burned his eyes. A potted plant in a bright orange vase stood guard in a corner, its green leaves swaying with uncertainty, like an unwanted guest at a party. "The game master is ready for you," the young girl said, putting a hand beneath his arm and helping him up. She pointed at a door beyond her desk. "The game master?" he asked, looking into her eyes. She said nothing but nodded and led him towards the door. "He'll explain everything to you." She pushed him through the door, and the world faded to nothing. Was he dead? The thought bounced off the edges of the nothingness that lay ahead, of him, rippling through the dark abyss, like a stone skimming across black water under the light of a new moon. Darkness pressed against him, thick and heavy. He tried to look around. He could feel his eyes moving, his head turning. But it was like he was underwater in the depths of the oceans where light feared to tread. Where was he? He wondered to the void, and his thoughts echoed back to him. Then another thought appeared, more concerning than the first. Who was he? "Mr. Smith," a voice called out. A male, deep voice. His heart leapt at the sound, eyes frantically searching for the source of that threat in the darkness. "Mr. Smith," the voice called again. He felt like he'd had this same experience not too long ago, or maybe it was very long ago. It didn't seem like the first time, nor the second, nor the third. Suddenly, he felt pain, red-hot pain, spreading across his face like lightning branching through storm clouds. His eyes fluttered open. "I'm sorry, sir," an old man said, leaning over. He was short and fat. Gray hair fell past his shoulders like polluted rivers, settling into the valley between the sagging mountains, straining against his tight t-shirt. It was like an unwanted invitation to a climbing expedition. Most people wake up quite quickly. Had he been asleep? He couldn't recall. His mind was an empty void except for quiet whispers of confusion. He put a hand to his cheek, his flesh raw and hot like his face had been pressed to a burning stove. "Did you—" He rubbed the side of his cheek, felt the heat under his palm. "Slap me?" "Come now," the old man purred. "You should be so lucky." He looked at him, the fleshy mountains, the gray hair, the piercing red eyes, and he very much hoped he wasn't lucky. He looked around the room, filled with the calm scent of spring flowers and the juicy aroma of summer fruits. It wasn't much of a room at all. Something drifted across the edges of his mind. A wooden desk, the figure 8, a plant. No such things existed here. He was cradled in a fluffy white sofa, as if sitting amongst the clouds, its fabric undiscernible, against the limitless expanse of white that surrounded him. It was broken only by a single disc, hanging in the air a few feet beyond the old man. Inside the disc was the image of a young man he didn't recognize, but he felt he should. Dressed in a hospital gown with faded blue dots, the man lay motionless, in bed, white sheets covering half his body. It was a white man, no older than 30, his face pale and thin with dark hair matted against his forehead. A neck brace held his head in place, and tubes and wires reached out from the man's arms to machines that surrounded the bed. A middle-aged woman, slightly plump with fading blonde hair, sat by the man's side, clutching his left hand between hers and looking lovingly at his face. A younger girl in jeans and a sweater slept in a chair by the window, her cheeks red and puffy. "Who is that?" he asked. The old man turned to view the disc himself. "That is you." He stared at the motionless man. "Me?" Then he realized he didn't even know who he was. But if that was him in the bed, then where was he now? "You're not dead," the old man said, as if reading his mind. Tyler Smith, 25, unemployed, college dropout, citizen of the United States of America, on the planet of Earth. Welcome to purgatory. Well, without the torment. Yet. The old man laughed. The name meant nothing to him, but he understood Earth and the USA. Again, thoughts drifted across the edge of his consciousness as if his mind were trying to recall the memories, but the connections were lost. "What happened to me?" "I'm glad you asked," the old man said, skipping away towards the disc. "Stay seated. Let me explain," he said, as if he were giving a tour. "You, good sir, were on the way to shoot up a school, but luckily for you..." His eyes widened. "Wait, what? Why the hell would I do that?" It was strange. He knew what a school was, understood how to use a gun, but he couldn't recall either being in a school or holding a gun. The knowledge was there in his head, but not the experiences. It was like knowing how to paint, but having no visions to share. The old man waved at the disc. "Recognize the girl? Sleeping there?" He shook his head. "She's your younger sister, Hannah, 18, and she had a friend, Madison, also 18, that you've known for about a year. Now, I hate to break it to you, but you kinda had a thing for Maddie. Asked her out. She said no. She wasn't the first to say no to you, but you were going to make sure she was the last. One of those, if I can't have her, no one can situations. Luckily for you, you had a crash on the way to the school. Left you quadriplegic, brain damaged, and in a coma." He shifted uncomfortably in his seat and stared at the disc. If he couldn't recognize the comatose man before, he sure didn't recognize him now. Didn't want to recognize him. Hitting on his little sister's friend? School shooting? He searched his memory for any hints of such darkness, but found nothing. "You're lying, am I?" The old man smirked at him. Looking into the old man's red eyes was unnerving, like he knew secrets that he wouldn't reveal. He turned back to the disc, looked at the younger girl, his sister. If what the old man said was true, he had been on his way to kill her friend. And there she was, face puffy from the tears she had cried. He looked at his mother holding his hand, as if she were praying for him to come back. Perhaps they didn't know what he had been planning. Perhaps they had as many questions for him as he did. His mind was completely blank. He'd like to think. He wasn't the kind of person this old man was insinuating, but he had no memory to confirm it. If I really planned to do that, maybe the crash wasn't a bad thing. Maybe it was justice. Maybe it was the fate of the gods for you to end up like that. The old man looked at him and smiled. But what if you could have another chance? What do you mean? What would you do if you had the choice between returning to your body as it is right now? The old man twisted his body and swept an arm out to motion towards the disc before turning back to him. Or returning to your life before you asked Madison out? The offer was intriguing. He wasn't sure he was the person in the disc, and even if he were, how exactly could this man return him to a time before now? When was now, for that matter? Where was here? He glanced at the endless expanse of white. What is this place? The old man made pistol motions several times, like a cowboy in a shootout, before he stopped and pointed a single finger towards him with a wink. This is the world between worlds. Like I said, purgatory, without the torment. Except the worlds you can go to aren't heaven or hell. Well, not literally, anyway. The old man gestured to the disc, and the image of the comatose man blurred, replaced with the image of a planet that looked like Earth at first glance, though on closer inspection, he saw that it wasn't Earth at all. It seemed to have less water, less clouds and greenery, but most noticeably, from north to south was a vast region of black desert that divided the planet in two. This is Cytheria, a planet in the outer reaches of the Andromeda Galaxy. It's a game world. A game world? He asked. Yeah. Gain experience, progress through levels, acquire skills, increase your advantages, become as powerful as you can. Like a game. See, Cytheria's inhabitants have been in a centuries-long war with entities from other worlds that invaded their lands. What Cytheria and many others like it need are heroes. Heroes to help them fight. What I do is offer the chance of redemption for those in positions like yourself. See, here, you have an opportunity. You're not the only one. Billions of souls across billions of worlds in circumstances similar to yours given an opportunity for another chance. Granted, not all of them planned to do what you were planning, but then there's plenty that did worse. Now, you could go back to that hospital bed. No memories, no guilt, just a broken body and a lost mind. Or, you can go to Cytheria, defeat the Rift Lords, and become a hero of the people. Then you get another choice. Stay in Cytheria and never return to your life, or you get to go back to before it all went wrong. The offer was tempting. His eyes remained on the world inside the disc as he pondered on the options, but his thoughts turned to his mother and sister. Did he have a father too? How would they cope if he never came back? Did it even matter? What would happen to me on Earth if I chose to remain in Cytheria? You'd remain comatose until your body withered away. Right now, you're an empty shell there anyway. The heart's pumping, but the engine's not there. Your soul, the essence of your being, is right here. You'd get a new body on Cytheria, or I send you back to that. The Game Master pointed at the disc. The image blurred again, and Tyler Smith returned, comatose mother and sister at his side. As he looked upon the image, wondering what this new world might hold for him, he was fairly certain that he didn't want to go back as he was now. Quadriplegic, brain-dead, a mother spending days and nights holding his hand, praying beyond hope that he would return. A sister spending days and nights crying, blaming herself for having introduced him to her friend. It might have been a deserved punishment for him, but it wasn't fair to them, and he hadn't done the deed, had he? Intention and action were two very different things. The line between them might be thin, but it was there. What would I have to do? The old man smiled, mouth curling towards his eyes. I won't lie to you. It won't be easy. You'll arrive in the kingdom of Illyria, on the borders with the Rift, the black region you see here. Over the course of your journey, you need to become a hero and join the armies or lead your own to take back the Rift. As long as it exists, it threatens the Cytherians. At this very moment, the Rift Lords are attempting to break free from the barrier that holds them back. It is only a matter of time before they do. We need to defeat them. If we don't, who knows what might happen? He took a look at the image of himself again. If he helped to overcome these Rift Lords, he'd get another chance. Get to go back to before he made that choice. A clean slate. A chance to do things properly. Or the chance for a new life altogether. A new world. A new life. A new beginning. His mind was made up. So how would this work? Is that a yes the old man said. Yes. You're absolutely sure? He had a final look at himself, asleep on the hospital bed, hooked up to the machines. I'm sure. I'll go to Cytheria. I'll become a hero. And I'll win. The old man looked at him and smiled, hands rubbing together in glee. That I would like to see. I hope you're the right kind of crazy to make it work. Okay, first things first. Do you want the simple tutorial or the advanced tutorial? What's the difference? The advanced starts you further along. It's a bit tougher, but you'll progress faster. Give me the advanced tutorial, he said. Anything that made the process quicker was welcome. As you wish, the game master said. You can't choose a different race or gender, so you'll spawn as a human male looking as you do now. You can choose a different name if you wish. Anything you want, 50 character limit. Imtheousum's Thoreau That's Ever Heroed came to mind. Can I change my name after? No. Tyler Smith is fine. Okay, human, male, Tyler Smith. Once you're there, if you say status, it will open up your UI and you'll be able to navigate from there. Are you ready? He nodded. Before you go, I should warn you about one thing. If you die in Cytheria, that's it. There's no going back, not even to your current body. He nodded again. Then I guess I better not die. Enjoy next story. Captain Hankovich looked back at me. His eyes were hollow. Hankovich and I went through basic and spec ops training together, and in all that time his eyes were full of life and hope, but not anymore. You see, this war had taken it out of him, to be fair. It has taken it out of all us. We have seen the true extent of the evilness and despair that one living being can do to another. From the New Horizon massacre to the Fallen Mountain schism, we've seen it all and done it all. It changed us. Yet, through this despair and depravity that this war has delivered, we stand at the steps of the heart and brain of the Analax Empire. The Analax Command Center, ACC. Humans and Analaxians were allies for many years, primarily because of our likeliness. Both of us were humanoid, and quite frankly, they looked like a gray, hairless version of us, almost like a race of the ancient folklore Slender Man. We stood side by side against the Templars of Prizor when they came on a crusade to spread their religion and ways to our homes. We stood side by side against the rising tide of the Neok Order when Neok the Tyrant wanted to crown himself the first emperor of the Milky Way. We stood together and died together, but now we kill each other. They attacked us on our Allied Friendship Day, the day that celebrated the close friendship that we had formed. Their justification, a video of human troops killing innocent Analaxian civilians. Seems fair enough. I mean, hell, we'd take revenge against anyone who did that to us, but the video was fake. Used by Smifra, an extremist Analaxian, to instigate a takeover of the Analax government and a war with humans. That was 7 years ago, and now we're at the doors of their kingdom with a C8 explosive. All right, fellas, the ACCC is around this wall. We have fought tooth and nail through this city to get to this point, so no fuck-ups now. As the briefing said, it's a simple execution order, no prisoners. Air support has taken out most of the hard defenses, but we still need to fight through the remnants of defenders. Once we breach the ACCC main lobby, we secure the lobby before moving up to the first floor. Copy that, Hankovich instructed. Copy, we said simultaneously. There was 30 of us in this task force, the best of the best. Blackcut, take your squad and clear out the defenders on the left of the compound, and my squad will clear out the right-hand side. We'll meet up at the main entrance into the building and breach together, Hankovich explained to me. I nodded and gathered my squad for the fight. On Hankovich's signal, we began our attack. Our squads moved up the stairs leading to the courtyard in front of the ACCC, taking out defenders that were on the stairs. Once we reached the first defensive wall, at the top of the stairs we split up, my squad taking the left and Hankovich's squad taking the right, fighting through the lines of defensive walls and sandbag walls the Analaxians had put up. As the captain said, most of the bunkers were blown to bits, which made our lives a lot easier. However, there was one bunker left on our side. We made it halfway through the defenses before it opened fire. The bunker killed 5 of my men before I managed to shout, "Cover!" Another 3 turned into pink mist before we all got to safety. I radioed over to my men. Rocket, you got eyes on the bunker? Negative, sir. It's hard to see with all the smoke and with it being night. Rocket replied, if we could get it to fire, then I could spot the muzzle flash. Shit. Right. Everyone, I want you to provide covering fire in front of us. On my signal, I will run out into the open. At that time, you will all fire except Rocket. Rocket, I want you to spot the muzzle flash and destroy the bunker with your rocket launcher. Does everyone copy? I ordered into the radio. I received 6 copies in response. 1, 2, 3. Execute. I ran out from behind my cover. 5 of my men opened fire into the penultimate defensive wall. The turret fired at me but missed. I saw the gun turret move to aim at me again, and then saw it charge. Up to fire, then I saw nothing but fire and smoke. Rocket had done his job and blew that bunker into smithereens, causing a sizable explosion, which knocked me back into a sandbag emplacement that made up the second defensive wall. I got to my feet and rejoined the remaining men at the third defensive wall. Well fucking done, Rocket. That's what I like to see, I exclaimed into the comms. We move forward and take out the remaining defenders at this wall and last wall. My men carried on to the fourth defensive wall and cleared out the surviving defenders from the bunker explosion. We then moved on to the last defenses to be met with, surrendering Analaxian soldiers. Around the same time, Hankovich and his squad had made it to the last defensive wall on their side. The courtyard defenses was split into 2 with the pathway to the main entrance from the stairs as the divider, hence why the task force was split. We couldn't breach without taking both sides, and attacking both sides at the same time meant that the defenders couldn't focus their forces on one side. Captain, we got 10 surrendered soldiers here. What should we do? I radioed to him. No prisoners, I received. They didn't care that our soldiers surrendered at New Horizon. We don't care here. An eye for an eye. With that answer, those soldiers were killed. We met up with Hankovich's squad at the main entrance. Sitrep, Hankovich asked. KIA. Thank fuck air took out the other bunkers. What about you? I responded. 1 dead, 1 injured. Right, men, listen up. I'll transfer the schematics of the building to your HUDs. After we have cleared the lobby, we will move up to the 1st floor and clear that out. We then will take the stairs from the 1st floor to the 10th floor. The Analax have made it that the stairs move from one end of the floor to the other, and every 10 floors. Luckily for us, that means we only have 30 floors to clear before the Senate room. Unluckily for us, though, it also means the Analaxians will be waiting for us on every 10th floor. On floor 200, we need to take out the city's air defense control. Familiarize yourselves with the schematics of the lobby and every 10th floor. We breach in 5 minutes, the captain ordered. The schematic showed that the lobby was a large open room with a receptionist desk at the center and a large stairwell leading up to the 1st floor. The ceiling was open for a balcony on the 1st floor looking down onto the lobby. The defenders would have most definitely put up a central defensive emplacement around the desk and along the balcony. Men, get ready. Shoddy, you're up, the captain instructed. The remaining men split up onto 2 sides of the door, with Shoddy coming forward to the door to plant C8 explosives. Blackcut and I will deploy our roller grenades and everyone else throw 1 flash into the room. Shoddy on your mark, Hankovich said. Now! Shoddy shouted. The doors flew into the lobby with a loud bang, followed suit by 4 roller grenades and a barrage of flashes. The sandbag emplacement no longer existed. With the Analax still being affected by the flash, the task force moved in, gunning down every Analaxian they saw move. The lobby had been secured. We moved up to the 1st floor and clear out the remaining defenders. Every 10 floors we went to, we faced more defensive emplacements and more Analaxians, and left no prisoners. Eventually, we reached the Senate. We lost 4 more men making our way up, but that number was nothing compared to the Analaxian loses. We murdered every single one of them in the ACC, and now we had 1 more to kill. Smifra. Shoddy used his electro shotgun to breach the Senate doors. We entered the short hallway that led to the Senate floor. The Senate room was a semicircular room with rows of benches going around and up the room. In the center was a stand with a microphone. The Senate was main image for Analaxian democracy before Smifra. Now it served only as a facade for democracy. Behind the stand was a door leading to the president's office. To our surprise, there was no one in the Senate room. It was completely empty, No defenders, nothing. We moved to the office door and got ready to breach. As Shoddy was about to breach, we heard a loud bang from within the office. Unfazed, we breached the office. Inside, we found a small circular room with bookshelves stretching the perimeter par from the back half, which was a massive window. In the middle was a desk with an alien sat in the desk seat, slumping over the desk with a sidearm in their left hand. We moved around the edge of the room, forming a perimeter around the desk. Blackcut check out. The Analaxian, Hankovich ordered. I approached the desk with my crosshairs on the alien's head. When I got closer, I noticed that blood was still dripping out of the wound in the alien's head and a fine line of smoke still protruding from the barrel of the sidearm. It was clear what the loud bang was. I checked the Analaxian's pulse and then moved its head up. It was Smifra. Hanko, it's Smifra, I said. Command, this is Jackal 1 Neo. Smifra is dead. The bastard did our job for us. Hankovich said calmly into the comms, knowing that it spelt the end of the war. Enjoy next story. When they showed up, no one knew what to think. Sure, we were nervous. Who wouldn't be? But the outright terror or wholesale panic you might expect from massive alien spaceships touching down on the planet wasn't generally present. The artificially calm sense of decorum the population felt was largely because they presented themselves as benevolent advisors. You should always beware slithering, side-creeping strangers who say they came to help. Don't believe a word. It's a damn lie. The thing about a genuine mentor is you can either accept or ignore their guidance. Once the directives became mandatory and were enforced without exception or mercy, the friendly visit rapidly migrated into the nightmare realm of a full-on arachnid invasion. Some knew it was an oppressive occupation from the very beginning. Others hoped for the best, while the overwhelming majority of us clueless fools simply accepted the distasteful yoke of slavery in blissful denial. The immediate defeat of our dominant species came without so much as a whimper. They dissolved all government and military organizations first. That's Invasion Protocol 101. Then they strongly discouraged all forms of worship and organized belief systems involving higher powers or deities. There was no need for any of that, they explained. We had them to praise and faithfully follow without question. Mass gatherings for any reason were not allowed. The nebulae didn't want organized dissension. Only serving our newly assigned, officially sanctioned purpose was permitted. The needs of individuals and independent thought in general were not entertained. As a matter of fact, individuality as a concept was discouraged in the absolute harshest of terms. I'm sure I don't need to spell out what that means, but basically, the few rogues and nonconformists who dared to stand up to them were made examples for mockery in the public domain. Civil disobedience and failed activism were violently quashed as a stark visual lesson for other potential troublemakers to witness. You get the picture. Our interstellar heroes shrewdly pointed to the fact that all wars and sectarian violence had ceased since their arrival. Overcrowding, crime, and hunger had been eliminated too. On the surface, it was hard to argue with these slippery, selfless saviors from afar. Of course, with freedom of speech being a fading facet of the past, arguing wasn't exactly possible any longer to debate the pros and cons. That only served to validate their point and justify the mercurial, authoritarian regime. To them, the complete elimination of our free will and personal choice in day-to-day matters was the perfect solution to end all of our problems. The amount of physical force used to control us was surprisingly minimal. They didn't have to. They used just enough shock and awe for people to know they could unquestionably compel us to comply. The advisors perfected psychological manipulation down to a science. Like obedient little subjects groveling for praise from our creepy, sidestepping overlords, we self-policed ourselves to the point they didn't have to raise a woolly, octopus-like tentacle. I don't want to paint myself as some brave leader of the nebulae resistance. I wasn't. I was a chicken shit coward like every other person with common sense. I didn't want to be zapped by one of their death ray guns or sent away for behavioral reprogramming. Like every reluctant upstart who led an insurgent revolution, I just got pushed too far one day and felt the uncontrollable desire to fight back. History is littered with examples of fools like me who dared to say enough. As a rudimentary rule of thumb, a person would be smart to avoid making waves or calling too much attention to themselves. Specifically, it was very wise, under the unique circumstances, to avoid eating crab legs, calamari, or smushing a spider in public. Initially, I didn't make the connection. Mistakes like that caught their attention in ways which did not lead to positive interactions at all. Perhaps they were distant relatives. Kusera Sera. I learned that, and a number of painful lessons from this ugly experience, the hard way. There was no real variation in how they verbalized things to us, because they used a generic digital vocoder to simulate human speech. I swear it must have been sampled from the 1970s disco hit, Funky Town. As if their startling visual appearance wasn't alarming enough on its own, imagine the mechanically tinged verbal communication. It was an effective 1-2 punch of "nah, I'm out of here." While they bore no significant humanoid features, they did possess a certain level of unique personality. I always avoided direct eye contact with their compound optic receptors. It was too difficult to focus without an obvious place to gaze. That's not to say I didn't watch them closely. I did. I noticed they would emit a hissy little squeak of displeasure when they were uncomfortable or highly agitated. It was hard to miss that telling quirk of their behavior, and I made a mental note to investigate and study it more. Just imagine a room filled with 5-foot-tall king crab octopus hybrids with gangly spider legs. They would swoop around the room to intimidate people and clank their shells together noisily in a display of flamboyant power. They would first declare their benevolence in the heavily digitized robot voice, while simultaneously correcting a person for eating an admiral's feast at a popular seafood restaurant chain. As you might have guessed, I was the poor slob who was corrected. There I was, breaking a crab leg in half when they scurried in and began pulsating in an apparent fit of ferocious rage. Before I knew what hit me, I was given a potent attitude adjustment for my unknown transgression. It was a powerful lesson to learn, I'll say that. And by correct, I mean they tortured me mercilessly with a severe headache-inducing pain device which brought tears to my eyes and numbed my extremities for hours. All for eating their cousin. If that's not clear enough regarding how intimidating and ruthless they were, 2 or 3 of their pods held arcane technology to vaporize us. To make matters worse, it was nothing for them to dart sideways, around a corner and then rapidly climb straight up the wall or scramble across the ceiling overhead. It was madness inducing to realize how agile and spry they were. There was no way to outrun them. That much was clear. I decided the only hope was to try to outwit them. Perhaps they believed their deluded savior nonsense. That would explain their indignant reaction to the revolt I organized later on. Describing the nebulae race as shifty would have been an understatement. At least we could hear the joints of their exoskeleton creak and flex. Because of that Achilles heel, they couldn't sneak up on us easily. If someone created a nebulae joint lubricant to quieten their mobility, we would have never fought back in the Great Mothball Uprising. The most critical piece of intel about the nebulae came purely by accident, as these things sometimes do. Upon a routine production inspection of the factory where I'd been assigned to work, their agent exhibited the most visceral reaction imaginable to the ordinary mothballs we produce in the plant. I thought the agitated alien inspector was going to melt like a slug doused with salt. It was rapturously drawn to the palm-sized object like a newly discovered treasure or a moth lured to a flame. Despite having a manic obsession with it, the noxious chemical makeup was obviously very toxic to the cleric. I saw no reason we couldn't produce a large production run of beach ball-sized nebulae ball prototypes for our sincere protectors to play with. That's where the idea came from, and the revolution was born. The basic plan was to lure as many of them as possible to the warehouse and then spring the massive trap on them. With any luck, they would react exactly the same way with the scaled-up version as the smaller ones. After seeing the poorly designed long-shot idea spelled out here, it's no wonder I am not a brilliant military strategist, but the harebrained scheme worked better than anyone could have imagined or hoped. I take full credit for all of my successes, no matter how much they might not be deserved. Their top leaders came to the fake exhibition, and we unleashed dozens of the massive chemical weapons on them in rapid succession. It was fascinating to watch it unfold. They tried to scurry away in mortal terror, but somehow the noxious substance drew them like a magnet. In just a few seconds, they were wrapped tightly around the balls and rapidly dissolved by the caustic chemical compound. I couldn't begin to explain why it worked, but in the end I didn't need to. Superman has his kryptonite, and the nebulae obviously have their mothballs. They couldn't resist them, and yet it was deadly. It actually cooked their soft tissues and left their hard shells hollowed out and smoking like they'd just been tossed into a boiling pot. The icing on the cake was witnessing their dying squeals. That, and no longer having to hear those damn Funky Town vocoders. After sharing my secret weapon with others who had been corrected across the world, they successfully pulled off the same operation a few dozen times like I had. The remaining survivors unfortunately grew wise to the ruse. They refused to be lured into any more mothball ambushes, but by then the nebulae were so outnumbered and demoralized by our insolence that they decided to leave Earth for greener pastures. Let them save another developing species from their own excess, greed, and carnal vices. Why are you ungrateful natives rebelling against our moral guidance and assistance? They demanded for me to respond. I mocked them as they shook and rattled in defiant fury. We've improved the human quality of life 100-fold. I relished hearing their squeaks of displeasure, but was careful to display no external awareness. I didn't know how familiar they had become with human body language, and didn't want to receive another parting shot correction as they disembarked. That's the completely true story of how we, eventually, cast off the enslavement yoke of benevolent stewardship by octopus, spider, crab walking space aliens with monotone vocoders. Slowly, we became self-reliant and free once again. At least as much as humanity could muster after going back to having global wars, corruption, violence, poverty, hunger, and deadly diseases. The original yoke of human failings and self-induced hardships around our necks returned. At least that one is all ours. The simple pleasures in life are back. Now we can enjoy a plate of steamed crab legs with an enhanced sense of appreciation. Live and learn. Now get to cracking. Thanks for diving into this story with me. Don't miss out on the next one. Hit that subscribe button, give this video a big thumbs up, and drop a comment below with your thoughts. I'd love to hear what you think.